Good Saturday morning to everybody, and welcome to Mortgage Matters Radio Show and the Connecticut Real Estate Edge podcast. Along with Rob Weinberg, I'm Gary Byron. Hey, Rob. Good morning.
Gary.
Great to see you, my man.
Good to see you again.
How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
How was your week?
Pretty good this week, moving along here, getting into the summertime, I guess.
Well, no, it's still April, but I mean...
The weather,
well,
though.
the weather, yeah, it's Connecticut because, watch, you have these 80-degree, 70-degree temperatures, and then, we could have freezing rain.
Well, I whatever. I'm from Florida. I love the hot, so the better it gets, the more I like it here. But with that said, we were talking about it last show, too, that I like more I guess I would call it like just everyone's aura during the summer and spring. It's
everybody's in a better mood.
Better mood. There's less depression. People are out and about. People are feeling good. There's a pep in the step. There's just socialization going on. We're not all cooped up, and I just feel like life is better.
There's a name for that seasonal depression, which is in the winter where it's darker early, it's colder. Well, now we're climbing out of that. But there's a name. Cabin fever.
Okay.
Jimmy J, producers say. No, that's not the technical term for it, but essentially that's what it ends up becoming. Now, traditionally, late March into April, you start to see the first wave of houses getting on the market. I remember over the winter, my town of Newington saw only, I think we had 4 or 5 houses. That was it.
Yeah,
that was on. I'm looking on Zillow. I'm looking on Realtor.com. I'm like, that's it. These are 4 or 5. I'm waiting. Used to be page 2, page 3. Now I'm starting to see, double that, triple that.
Well, yeah,
so
like we've been talking about on this show.
It's still nowhere near where,
Look, it's not going back to what it was. I think the statistic I read was that during the last housing bust, there was 4 million homes for sale nationwide. Now, in the current market, there's less than 1 million. Okay, we talked about supply and demand. Like, you don't have to take out a math or a calculator and figure math on a sheet of paper to know that 1 million homes is way less than 4 million. So that's the reason why I think we're going to keep seeing that support of home prices. But as you alluded to, Gary, we hit that time of year where people that were thinking about selling finally start pulling the trigger. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more homes come on the market over the next 30, 60, 90 days, as we normally do in the spring and summer. I don't think we're going to see an influx of properties. Absolutely not. I don't think we're going to see a glut of homes sitting on the market.
This year or for
this year is all I can really say.
Okay.
I can't really speak years out, but because so much could change, right? But right now, all of the economics are there for like really, really low supply and really, really high demand. Even if another 20 homes came on the market in Newington, there still wouldn't be enough, right? There wouldn't. There's just more people that want to buy than there are homes to be able to be sold to them. So I'm very hopeful that we'll continue to see that escalation in home, not home values, but more so home listings, right? But with the new listings coming on the market, there's new buyers coming in to get those listings. There's new people getting pre-approved right now that had also been waiting for the spring and summer. Maybe for their kids, most people, it's because they don't want to pull their kids out of school. So by buying in that spring and summer, they can close in like July, August, get the kids in the new house, and then get them in the new schools without skipping a beat. So this is something every year we see this zigzag, this ebb and flow. This year is no different, but I think it's more embellished because we're coming off such low inventory. Right. So let's hope that continues.
Okay. There's always hope. When someone is, I don't know, closing in on a mortgage, they want to close on their mortgage. Good God, we could use the best of advice, right? I mean,
yeah, everyone gets really, really worried about the closing process.
Well, squirreling money away for a close, there's a closing cost, and don't
attorney's
financially
fees,
strap
down payment. What do I need? What don't I need? What did I already pay? Like, I get it. It's so confusing. It really is, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but like one of the big things is if you're listening right now and you're stepping back going, I'm closing on a house or I'm in the process of buying a house and I don't know what the heck to do. I don't know what my next steps are. I don't know what the closing looks like. I don't even know when the closing really occurs. Well, number one, this show is for you. You're going to want to listen the entire way through because we're going to tackle all that. But number two, if you're having those doubts in your head, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here, but it's really time to have a heart-to-heart with yourself and maybe with your other professionals to figure out who you're working with in this transaction, meaning your real estate agent and your mortgage lender. Them being the main two that are going to be holding your hand through this process and ultimately through the finish line, which is the closing. So if you're not feeling comfortable, you don't have that trust, and you don't have that framework or that game plan, then I think that's where we have to start, is just kind of redoing and recalibrating, and at the very least communicating and saying, hey, I'm confused. I need help. What do I need to expect here?
All right. So I was told put aside $10,000 for a closing cost. It could actually be less, but you'd rather
It could be more, too. I'll tell you. If you're buying a $2 million home, it's a heck of a lot more than $10,000 in closing costs.
It's all relative, I suppose.
Yes.
How much are attorney fees? How much is the inspector? How much is he going to charge?
So, Gary, I wanna step back from that, because everything that you asked is a valid question, but every single person that's listening is going to have a different answer, okay? Your home inspection might be $500, theirs might be $450. Your appraisal might be $600, their appraisal might be $489. So, yes, those are valid questions, but not until you know what house you're buying, not until you know your price point, not until we have all these other variables.
What about an attorney fee?
Attorney's fee also. Some attorneys charge $750. I've seen others charge $3,000. Exact same attorney. In Connecticut. What's the difference? Well, one may be, mainly focused on high net worth or higher end properties. They're going to charge more complicated scenarios.
Pretty big discrepancy.
Well, then you may have one. The main attorney we've had on the show that I use, Keith Hathaway, gives my clients an amazing deal. And this isn't for everyone, so I'm not going to tell the price, but he gives a really, really low price to my clients that'll smoke any attorney ever in Connecticut that I've ever seen. But he gives great service. And he does that because I send a lot of volume through. So again, your attorney fee might be different. And if someone's doing a loan with me and using my preferred attorney, you're darn right, their attorney's fee is less than that guy in Greenwich charging $3,000. Okay. Right. So that's very, very important. But there's different things that happens during the closing process. All right?
Let's talk about that. What exactly does happen? I mean, kind of walk us through the different steps involved.
So as we're leading up to the closing, we're going to have the clear to close. The clear to close is when the underwriter says, they basically check a box and say, we've reviewed everything, you're ready to close, okay? And that's a huge part of the process for Celebration. It really is. Because you as the buyer, most of your paperwork is done. Like the mortgage process is coming to a close, okay? We're at like third base, headed for home at that point, So you're almost done. So clear to close, once that's completed, then typically I facilitate the scheduling of the closing at that point. So I'm going to communicate out to everyone, the attorneys, the realtors, we're ready to close, we're ahead of schedule, or we're right on schedule, right on track. And we try to get an idea of what the closing date's going to be at that point. Schedule the closing, potentially even schedule the exact time and location of where you're going to go for that closing. And this might be a couple days before. It might be, I have a client right now that's 3 weeks they're doing this, and they're not closing for 3 weeks. But they still have their closing scheduled for the end of April. You see, but they're still doing that now. So it doesn't have to wait till the last minute. The next thing is going to be the final numbers review and tabulation. So there's going to be a closing disclosure or a settlement statement, depending on the type of loan that you're getting. And it's going to detail all the fees, the attorney's fee and all the appraisal fees, loan origination, all these different fees. It's going to outline. And two very important things it's also going to outline are how much money you need to bring to the closing, meaning send your attorney for the rest of your down payment, closing costs or whatnot. And number two, and arguably even more important, what's your final monthly payment on the mortgage, right? Down to the penny, including everything. What is that monthly payment? So we're going to finalize those numbers, and that can take a couple days, even a week or more, depending on your attorney and how quick they do that. So once that's done, we're going to review it with you. I'm going to sit down. The way I do it is I sit down with my clients, typically over the phone, and we'll spend between 10 and 20 minutes going over the entire disclosure, top to bottom. I give them all the important information. I have a whole checklist that I review. Side note, I had a client moving to Connecticut from Sydney, Australia, just closed a couple weeks ago, and he wasn't able to do it on the phone with me because of the time difference. So we had been facilitating a lot over video, so I did a screen capture video where I brought up his closing disclosure, and I recorded a 10-minute video, just like we were on the phone, showing him on the screen all the different fees and charges, everything he needs to know. And let me tell you, he wrote a review afterwards, and one of the main things he said in the review was how much he liked having that video reference. And I saw he watched it several times. So that's an important part, is reviewing those closing numbers. Then you're going to wire the money or get the cashier's check to your attorney, however they're going to want the money for closing. And then you're going to do the final walkthrough on the property. Typically, you'll walk through the morning of or the day before closing. You'll sign all the final paperwork, and you'll get the keys to your home and then move in.
Are you there that day?
That's it. Depending, I mean, I've had people close at my office. Usually, though, they close at an attorney or their realtor, and typically also the seller and the buyer will close at different times, sometimes different locations as well.
All right, I mean, look, closing day, it can be very nerve-wracking for home buyers. Maybe explain what they can expect on the actual big day.
Yeah, so, you've had this build-up over this mortgage process, which could be a couple weeks to a couple months, and you want to make sure that you have it smooth. You don't want to have any hiccups on that big day, right? It's almost like your wedding day for buying a house. So what you want to do, just some best practices, make sure your funds are with your closing agent or closing office ahead of time. I usually recommend that my clients send their money the day before or even a couple days before if they can. It just makes sure that the money's where it needs to be and there's no hiccups or issues waiting for it. If you need to do a bank or cashier's check, that sort of thing, go in and do it. Don't wait till the morning of the closing, because there can be delays if you do that. The next thing is you're going to want to do your final walkthrough, typically with your realtor, and you're going to do that the morning of the closing or the day before. I wouldn't do it more than a day before the closing, because what if there's a flood in the house the night before? What if something came up and there's a issue with the house and you did a walkthrough a week before closing? Well, if that issue just came up, you're not going to be able to call it out. So I really think it's a best practice not to do a final walkthrough more than 1 to 2 days ahead. The next thing is you want to make sure that you show up to the office where you're doing your closing at the scheduled time. You have no idea how many people I've had. I got told last week that the buyer showed up an hour late for their closing. That's not professional. You're wasting people's time. Like, you're buying a house worth many hundreds of thousands of dollars. Treat it like you're showing up to work. Treat it like a business and show up on time so people aren't waiting on you. Unfortunately, that does happen. So be on time. Be prepared with your forms of ID. You're going to need at least one, sometimes two forms of identity, right? Driver's license, passport, some sort of government photo ID. So have that ready. You're going to go and sign the final paperwork. This is your chance to ask questions. If you have questions in Connecticut, you have to sign this in front of an attorney. Talk to the attorney. Ask your questions. If they don't know the answer, call your loan officer. Like, I've had it happen, not often, but I've had people call me, say, hey, I have a question on this number. Hey, what's this fee for? We can handle it. We can address it. But once you're done signing, it's a done deal. So let's do it ahead. Then what's going to happen is the documents that you sign are going to be sent into the mortgage company for a funding authorization. And they're going to want to see the proof of funds. Where did you get that money that you sent us? What bank account did it come from? If you showed us that you had money in Bank of America, but you're sending money from Citizens Bank, there's going to be a problem, okay? We have to know where that money's coming from. It's called sourcing your money or proof of funds, okay? So that's really, really important. And then usually if it's during the business day, within 20 to 30 minutes, the funding department's going to look at all the documents, make sure that every signature that needs to be there is there. No dates are missing. Nothing's missing. Everything's initialed. And then they're going to email back and say, you're cleared for funding. If there's a problem, they're going to say, hey, you're missing this on this page, or we need this, we're missing this. Then we have the opportunity to go back and forth and get it. But as soon as they give that funding authorization, that's when you get the keys to your home and you can move in.
So I've heard lately, quite often actually, a term called cleared to close. What is this all about?
Yeah, so cleared to close is a term that's thrown a lot online, especially, and it's almost, people act like it's the closing, but it's not. It's like going through, I don't even know what to compare it to really, Gary, but it's really
like a walkthrough at a wedding. You're at a wedding. I mean, you're ready to go. In other words, even though the closing day is going to be tomorrow, rehearsal. If it were right now, you were ready to go.
Yeah, so the clear to close means that we're at the final step, is the way that I would say. Like, you've done all this work that you've done, all this time that you've put into getting this mortgage and getting this house, it's now come to fruition. We're now at the final stage, okay? So almost look at it like you found your soulmate, you've gotten engaged, and now you've set your wedding date. The wedding date is equivalent to the closing date, right? Mm-hmm. So now you're ready to go. I guess that's probably the best example. But what clear to close actually means is that the underwriter has cleared all of the major conditions on your loan. So if you think back to a show we did a while ago about the underwriting process, when the underwriter looks at your loan, they're coming back with questions. They're coming back with concerns and items. Well, once they've given the clear to close, it means you've satisfied all these conditions. We're satisfied with what you've provided to us, and we're now going to give you the clearance to move to that final step. We're now going to give you the clearance to schedule your closing and move into your home. So you now have the go-ahead to move forward. That's what clear to close is all about.
When it comes to getting the final numbers, though, for the closing, how far in advance can you expect to receive them?
So years ago, when I started in the industry, it was normal to not get your final numbers till the night before the closing.
Oh.
I even had some times where you'd be closing at 3 p.m. and we wouldn't have the final numbers till 10 a.m. that day. That's really, really tight timeline. So not to get political, but there were some new laws put in place, around 2011 or so that changed some of this stuff. So you had to have a lot more time to ask your questions, view everything. So the law is that at least 3 business days ahead of your closing, you should have, if not the final numbers, very close. All the fees should definitely be finalized. If we're waiting on anything, it's like an oil tank adjustment, propane, that sort of thing. But other than that, at least 3 days ahead. Now on a refinance, you should know those numbers minimum 3 business days ahead, like payment, your cash to close, what debts we're paying. But on a home purchase, there's different parties involved, like we've discussed. So your mortgage lender might be ready with their numbers, but the seller's not ready yet. So in those cases, it can get squeezed out. It can get pushed out to where you have to have those numbers at least 3 days. But I try to do it a week or 2 ahead. That's what I always try. If there's only one little number we're waiting on from the seller's attorney or something, we can get you everything else. We can tell you what your final payment is, how much money you need for closing within a couple $100, right? And then right before the closing, a day or 2, we can get down to the bottom line penny. But that's more common on a home purchase where, again, there's a lot of different parties, a lot of different moving parts. But again, your lender should be communicating with you because the TRID law, it's called TRID, T-R-I-D. It says that you have to have these final numbers at least 3 business days ahead.
Folks, you are listening to Mortgage Matters Radio Show and the Connecticut Real Estate Edge podcast. Along with Rob Weinberg, I'm Gary Byron. If you'd like some more information on Rob, check out his website at www.robgw.com. And his phone number, very easy, it's 860-413-3938. By the way, if I spoke too quickly, I'm going to repeat all of these points of contact more towards the end of the show. Rob, when you receive the closing documents, how much time do you have to review them before actually signing on the dotted line?
Yeah, so when you're talking about the closing documents, you typically, for a home purchase, you're going to need to sign them that day. Something my company does is we send the closing package out on express closings, which are hybrid or electronic type of closings. You could have the closing package a week ahead of time or more. So you've got plenty of time to review it ahead. If you're doing an old-fashioned wet sign closing, you're going to want to ask them for the closing documents ahead of time because if you don't ask them, then 99% you're not going to get them till the day of the closing. So if you're someone that's very analytical that wants all that information ahead, you have to ask for it because they're not required to give it to you ahead of time. And it's going to require like an extra accommodation for you. So if you're buying a home, then that copy you get ahead of time is going to be like a read-only copy. You're not going to sign that copy. It's just to look it over. But once you sign them on the closing day, it's a done deal. There's no rescission period or anything like that. So take your time reading. I've had people sit in closings for 2 or 3 hours. Not usually, but sometimes. So take your time reading it, ask questions. There's an attorney there, and pick up the phone and call your loan officer if you're in doubt, if you have any question or concern. I know that if I have a client that's closing, I find out when they're closing, and I make sure that I'm available during that time. So it doesn't happen often at all. I'll tell you, Gary, I get a call less than 5% of the time at my closings, okay? Mm-hmm. I've heard there's loan officers that get calls at every closing because they don't go over everything with the client. But I get calls very seldom, but I want to be available if there's a question or concern to address it then, not have you waiting in limbo or anything like that. Now, if it's a refinance on a primary home, there's a 3-day rescission period. So after you sign, there's actually 3 business days before they disperse the money. The purpose of that 3 days is to give you time to reread everything. You'll sign it, but it's not actually binding until after the 3 days. God forbid you see something there you don't like or you have a change of heart, you can sign a rescission notice or cancellation notice and send it in, and the entire loan will be voided and canceled. And
you lose
it will
your
not
deposit?
go through. Well, this is on a refinance, so there is no deposit.
Okay, I got you. I'm kind of curious about the whole rescission period.
Mm-hmm.
Just explain maybe a little bit about it, how it works.
So rescission period is this time that you have after signing the documents that allows you to back out of the deal or cancel the deal, okay? This is not applicable when you're buying a property. I want to be clear. Home buyers, whether you're buying an investment, primary or second home, there is no rescission period. You sign, you leave the office, you're done. Like, you bought the house. Even if you a minute later come back and say, I don't want to buy the house, it's too late. With a refinance on a primary home is the only place that this applies, is a primary home. Then you have the 3-day rescission period. It doesn't count Sundays or holidays, so keep that in mind. But that gives you time to ask questions to the loan officer, reread, and make sure you're getting the deal that you thought you were going to get. And if not, you can sign it and cancel the whole thing.
You clarified it. Thanks. I was a little confused here. What kind of info is typically included in the closing disclosure? And it really is there anything that the home buyers should kind of pay special attention to?
Yeah, so one of the things that I like with the closing disclosure is that it gives you really all the main relevant information that you need. Now, years ago, we used a different form called the HUD-1 settlement statement. It was a little more confusing. Some people like that one more. Some people like the closing disclosure more. I can't say I like the closing disclosure more, but one of the things I do like about it is it gives you a lot more information about the mortgage. It gives you a lot more information in one place about the loan that you're taking, about the property that you're buying. So really, we're talking about all relevant information. What's your interest rate? Is it fixed or is it an adjustable rate? What's your monthly payment? Does the monthly payment include tax and insurance? Whether it does or not, what are the tax and insurance on the property? Are there homeowners association fees? Another thing is cash to close. How much money do you need to come up with to close that deal? After they subtracted, say, your earnest money deposit, your appraisal fee that you already paid, that sort of thing. So all that's going to be on there. The page 2 of the closing disclosure has a full breakdown of all of the fees. The mortgage fees, the attorney's fees, the appraisal fees, the recording charges to the state, title insurance fees, literally every and any fee that's being charged on that loan, you're going to be finding detailed on page 2 of that closing disclosure, and all the disbursements being done, debts being paid off, mortgage payoffs, that sort of thing.
You know, of all the documents that are included in the whole closing package, what do you think are the ones that are the most significant?
Yeah, and this is a major source of contention, Gary, because a lot of people see a mortgage closing package, which could be hundreds of pages, and wonder, oh my God, like, which ones do I need to worry about?
Right.
Which ones don't? And look, I'll be blunt here. Most of the stuff in the mortgage closing package is a CYA document, if you know what I mean, written by attorneys to cover the mortgage company and come up with every possible legal scenario to make sure they're protected. With that being said, as a home buyer, which ones do you really want to focus on? The closing disclosure, we were just talking about. The closing disclosure or the settlement statement by far is going to be the most important because it's going to show you all the important parts of that loan. Again, interest rate, fixed or adjustable, monthly payment. Can the loan balance go up? Is it a balloon mortgage? Is it a prepayment penalty? All these things that we used to have to like dig deep into documents, now it's just all shown on the closing disclosure. So it's very easy to figure out what deal you're getting right there. So that's number one. Number two is the promissory note. The promissory note is a written agreement which contains the details of the mortgage. So it'll go even more in depth on like foreclosure processes, delinquencies, things like that, and how that works with your mortgage. And then the last document that I would say is arguably the most important, at least after the closing disclosure, is the actual mortgage. The mortgage is the document that secures the promissory note to the property. So it ties that loan you're taking to the property that you're buying. Those are the most important.
Listen, you and I both know technology has been changing the mortgage industry, most industries actually, in a big way. Just really, I'm running out of time. Just talk briefly about the different types of e-closing options that there are available now.
So it seems like the further we get in time, the more in vogue these become. So electronic closing is where you can sign most or all the documents for your closing online. They also allow an e-note, which is an electronic note. It used to be required to be signed in pen in person. Now they allow it to be done electronically. There's a hybrid e-close, which combines an e-close with a regular closing for the notarized docs. The stuff that has to be witnessed by an attorney is done in person in wet sign, but then the other part's done online through an electronic process where it's all secure and everything. And then the last one's going to be called RON, which stands for Remote Online Notarization. This is right now the most prominent thing going on in the mortgage and real estate industry. It's allowing people to not only close on a home, but close remotely, where you can be in a completely different location than I am, and I can still close on that home. It uses video calls, Zoom. I can't say Zoom for certain. I know there's certain specific protocols and software that's used in the legal industry that coordinates this remote online notarization. But this is becoming to be the big way and the next thing in mortgage, because people are going to be able to literally be sitting on a beach on vacation and closing on a home right here in the U.S. The docs can be signed online. They can be notarized via webcam with an attorney or a notary facilitating. That's huge.
All right, last question. You've got a minute and a half to answer because we're running out of time. The future, what does it hold? What do you see? You know, if you had a crystal ball, kind of looking into the future,
the closing process for mortgage and how it's going to change in the future. I think the new developments that we're looking at are quicker closings. You know, when I was starting in the industry, 3-4 weeks was normal. Now we can close in 1 or 2 weeks in some cases, you know, so that's quicker. Using new technology to make the process more seamless, electronic appraisals, automated appraisals, artificial intelligence appraisals. Imagine home inspections being done by artificial intelligence, things like that. That's going to like move this mortgage and real estate process so far ahead. I believe that you'll be able to buy a home within 7 days. In less than 5 years. Wow. I really do believe
From
that.
Beginning of the process to the end?
I do believe it. Now, there are certain technical, legal things that need to be changed because legally it's supposed to take longer than that to give you time. But once the legal catches up with the tech, you're going to be able to buy a home and get a mortgage in 7 days or less.
Well, that's
I truly
promising.
believe that. Absolutely. And you're going to be able to do it on your own time and in your own location as well, let me add.
Future looks bright. Folks, you've been listening to Mortgage Matters radio show and the Connecticut Real Estate Edge podcast. If you'd like more information on the discussion today, as well as any of the other topics that we've had in the past, simply head on over to Rob's website. It's www.robgw.com. Incidentally, if you have a question that you'd like to have answered, maybe right here on these very airwaves, simply email Rob. It's easy to do. It's Mortgage Matters Radio Show at gmail.com. And by the way, if you'd like to set up a consultation with Rob, here's the phone number. Write this down. I know it's the weekend. You can call him on the weekend. I'd say give him a call first thing on Monday. Write it down, though. 860-413-3938. Let me repeat that for you. 860-413-3938. For Rob Weinberg, I'm Gary Byron. Thanks so much for listening to Mortgage Matters Radio Show and the Connecticut Real Estate Edge podcast. Until next Saturday, have a good one, everybody. So long.